The BMA's Fair Medical Trade campaign launched with national media attention earlier this year. It highlighted the problems of poor working conditions and child labour in the production of surgical instruments. However, it is clear that these problems are not limited to Pakistan. Dr. Mahmood Bhutta, the founder member of the BMA's Medical Fair and Ethical Trade Group, joined me today to discuss his recent research trip to Mexico, where he investigated labour conditions used to manufacture a large range of medical products used in the NHS. What prompted this research trip to Mexico?
Mexico is actually a large area for the production of medical goods. In fact, it produces an estimated $9 billion worth of goods every year. Largely, that is for the US market, but some of those US suppliers are also supplying other countries within Europe, including the National Health Service. I've looked around some of the storerooms within my own hospital and found a significant number of goods made in Mexico.
What sort of medical products are we talking about here?
I think it's quite varied, the US has a long history of outsourcing manufacture to Mexico because basically it's cheaper to do so. So I think there are things like plastic goods in particular, but also surgical masks and some textiles are also manufactured there.
So how are these products actually being produced in Mexico?
Well, we visited a few factories whilst we were out there. We visited some factories making masks and textiles, for example, and some factories making bandages and swabs. And what we found, certainly with the masks and the textiles, was that a lot of the manufacturing process had been almost subcontracted. They were using home workers a lot of the time, basically because it's cheaper to employ people effectively to work in the home rather than within the factory.
Did you have a look at what the sort of conditions these home workers are producing these goods under?
Yeah, one of the mask manufacturers, for example, they have 20 people working within the factory, but they have 250 people working outside. And we went to one of these houses of this home worker, and it was in a small village, quite a modest sort of house with sort of 6-7 people living in about 4 rooms. And basically this gentleman's job was to try and fit the string of the mask into the actual filter piece. And he was doing hundreds and hundreds of these every day. It's quite tiring work, and basically they get paid a piece rate, so he has no real job security. It makes it very difficult for him to look after his family. And because he's not an employee of the factory, and this is the reason it's cheaper to use home workers, he has no access to health and social security, as are required for people working within the factory by the local labour law.
Oh, did you see any evidence of children doing this sort of work at home?
When we spoke to the families, obviously money is a bit tight. They don't get paid a tremendous amount for producing these things, and sometimes when the need arises, they did say that sometimes the children had to help out with these sorts of things. So yes, and again, because these are home workers, nobody's really responsible for them. People aren't really aware of how big an issue this potential child labour issue is.
What sort of thing can be done to try and improve the lot of some of these people working under poor conditions?
I think, as we've said previously with the group, we found this problem with surgical instruments, and we know from other reports that there are problems with textile manufacturing in places like India, with the manufacture of gloves in Malaysia. I think generally the idea is that we need people who are procuring and the people who are manufacturing in these regions to take some responsibility, to try and find out where their products are being produced and ensure that the labour conditions that they're being produced under are fair and are ethical.
There was talk about the NHS producing a consultation to do with encouraging trusts to procure more ethically. Do you know what's happened to this?
The NHS, through the Department of Health, did release a document in December 2008. Unfortunately, the document has not yet been finalised because of some of the political upheaval that's been happening in the UK. But we really, really do see that as a necessary next step for us to make sure that the NHS trusts and other organisations that want to take this issue forward have the means and the tools to do this.